and welcome from Dublin. So my paper for the routines track is looking at the dynamics of internship goals, and I'm interested in unpacking the understanding of internship goals. So I'm going to go through the slides that I will be presenting for the session. So I'm interested in university-industry relationships, and I think internships are often forgotten as one way in which universities can interact with industry. So it led me to look at internships in my PhD, and I looked at internships across 4 cycles of the internship. So the first thing, when I was looking at the literature, I realized that there is a problem in the literature in that, one, it's limited. It was very limited empirical work, and the work that is done, it doesn't really provide any clear, agreed description or definition of internships. And that, I think, is important when we come to trying to describe internships as a routine. The prevailing literature talks about a lack of processual descriptions. So I'm using routines theory for that. And the research is fragmented in that it looks at either student perspectives or employer perspectives or university perspectives in different aspects of internship research, but rarely looks at them together, and there's very little empirical work on that. So there's a significant gap in the literature. Also, internship effectiveness is dominated with a call that goals that employers, students, and universities would have should be aligned, and that is the dominant perspective in the literature. So what I did was, as I said, used routines theory to try and update or develop the description and address the idea of trying to define what the routine is, which you see in routines literature. And I collected data across 3 broad areas using the 2003 paper to guide me in this: ostensive, material, and performative, and the 2008 focus on the material side. And I did this across 4 internship cycles, so over 4 years. So it allowed me to compare across the cycles and within the cycles. So what I looked at for this particular paper was to focus in on the ostensive understanding of the goals across students. What did they understand the goals of the routine to be? What employers understood it to be, and what university staff were promoting it as. And it allowed me to compare and contrast, as I said, across the cycles. I've been particularly guided by the idea that goals contribute to action. I just wanted to put that in there. So really this paper is unpacking the routine goals of what is a very popular pedagogic tool, often used recruitment tool by employers, and really the gap in empirical work on internships. That's what I'm contributing to in this paper. So if you tend to look at the discussion around routine, the internship goals, it tends to be, particularly in the popular press, an issue of pay and experience, or unpaid experience, in that students would forego pay for the promise of experience. And this, if you follow much of the labor law issues around this and discussion of how interns, particularly graduate interns, after college interns, how they're treated if they are unpaid. So there are many examples of this, but predominantly the discussion is around pay and experience, or pay versus experience. But in the academics context, the goal around internships is around long-term employability, which is linked to career development issues. And it's very much an overt goal, particularly in the literature. But the variations on what pay and experience is and how they're linked, which are often discussed in the short term, so still overt, but it needs further unpacking. So really what this paper does is it's about unpacking more the latent ostensive dynamics around unpaid experience or pay and experience or paid experience. And that's the kind of dynamics that the paper explores in more detail. So really defining some literature, as I mentioned, is that you know the goal of an internship is paid versus experience, or it's unpaid experience, that you forego one for the other. And you may not get a good experience. So what happens if you're not getting good experience? Are students happy with just getting paid? But it's discussed as a dualism. And that's really a finding from the literature. So as I went through looking at four internship cycles, what emerged from the data was 3 stages: a pre-placement, during, and post-placement stage within each of the cycles. And each of the stages reflected a different emphasis on what would be understood as paid experience or paid and experience. And really the question is, really, are these goals conflicting? If they are conflicting and they need to be aligned, or are they balanced? Or is there a form of truth? So I'm introducing some of the theoretical aspects that might come into the paper. So here is a diagram of all the goals. I'm just going to move this here. And if you look at it from a student perspective, who you're looking at the internship, at the beginning of the internship, before they even went out to employer sites, they really emphasize pay. Now, there were reasons for this, because the financial crisis from 2008 had kicked in, and they were now looking at pay as something that was really important. But as they moved through the process, and at the end of the internship, particularly through their role shifting from intern to kind of employee, adopted identity for their role, they began to talk about experience and long-term career development. So there seems to be a balancing act, or shifting from pay to experience, because both were there, but there was just more emphasis on one over the other. The employers, on the other hand, didn't seem to want to pay generally, and the financial crisis allowed them not to provide paid internships. But they didn't also really contribute to experience, or they didn't give resources to providing experiences. In many cases, experience was something that the students would gain vicariously by just being on the premises. They really saw the goal of the internship through the lens of productivity, by reducing pay and by not providing any additional resources to experience. And it was very much focused on productivity in the short term. So they were either filling a gap or taking advantage of seasonal workers. But some employers who did look at the goal of the internship in the long term tend to be more like large accountancy firms with established recruitment and selection routines, where they saw an intern as meeting a long-term productivity goal. They often saw the intern as within a longer recruitment process that came in to the internship routine. So the routine was often a part of a longer recruitment and selection process, and the 6 months or 16 weeks on internship was a long interview. For the university staff, the goals are very different. They had short and long-term goals, such as at the beginning of the routine, placing all students, matching and selecting and matching the students for employers, for example, were immediate goals, and you wanted to match a student with the specialism to the internship that was available. Very difficult in the financial crisis when finance students couldn't get any internships, so they were being matched with internships that were not in their specialism. But more long-term focus was very much on academic credit and maintaining the quality. When pay was excluded from the internship during the financial crisis, and employers not offering pay, The university manager, the internship manager, shifted to her goal to talking about experience. So she had to adapt, and she built in a lot of flexibility into the internship routine by adapting the goals and talking about the importance of experience in the absence of pay. But she talked about this in terms of credible employers. She thought that pay was really important to contribute to the quality of the placement, but so was a credible employer. Opportunistic employers were seen as lower. So there is an element of ranking of goals for the university manager, as she ranked goals with pay used as an indicator of quality. When pay was excluded, credible employer was used as an indicator of quality, or providing good experience. So where students shifted from pay to experience, university perspectives tended to rank pay over experience. And then once pay was gone, experience was elevated. But there was also this dynamic of short and long-term goals, whereas the long-term career development and employability, as discussed in the internship literature, is present. So what you're seeing is across the three different actor groups, the weighted goals were either balanced or ranked, whether there's a gestalt view in which goals are brought forward and put into the background. Is something I'm battling with in terms of my interpretation of the data for this paper. So three theoretical questions. The first question is two interpretations of pay experience. Is it pay versus experience, which is a dualism, or is it paid experience or pay and experience as a duality, as two sides of the one coin? And depending on how you interpret that, because the data shows an element of both, depending on which actor you're looking at, depending how you interpret it, it provides new insights for internships and internship design, and whether goals need to be aligned. And there's a paradoxical aspect in that. The second theoretical question I would ask is, are goals, are they ranked or are they balanced? And my issue that I'm dealing with in interpreting the data is that, for me, it's an issue of granularity. If you are taking the magnifying glass and holding it back from the data, you can often see, I guess, you can show that goals are often balanced, or just something in a gestalt nature where they're moved back and forth. But as you move the magnifying glass up to the data and take a more fine-grained analysis, you tend to see an interpretation that's reflective of the early economic literature on this, where you're seeing economic choice, or there's a ranking of goals, or one goal is chosen over another. And it raises questions for me in the paper as to the simultaneity of goals. Can goals in the long term and short term exist at the same time? How are they balanced? Long-term goals suggest opportunities for alignment, whereas short-term individual goals in a routine suggest a greater conflict. The third theoretical issue in terms of analyzing the data that I'm addressing is the nature of the centrality of goals, and the nature of peripherality of goals. So in the diagram you saw on the previous slide, you can see that pay and experience is presented in a more centralized way, whereas all of the other items tend to be more peripheral because they're specific to each actor group, whether such as productivity being specific to employers. So these are three theoretical questions that I'm interested in people probably raising or discussing. It would be very helpful for me to get some feedback on this, because this is what I'm pursuing in terms